Well, I think we have kind of an impossible job here of 20. I think these are really, to me, these are really interesting talks. And a number of themes came out. I'm just going to rip through these because there's creativity, self-direction, collaboration, connected with additive innovation, the relevance and meaning of activities to both individually and the community, the importance of networks, pathways, and the whole, learning ecosystem. We need to both help connect the dots and then provide pathways within those networks for students and help them, find the on-ramp so they can take advantage of all these resources. The potential for making to help us broaden participation in science, but that means we also have to have maker activities and spaces available. The blurring of informal and formal, if this movement can take root in schools. Interesting of teachers as makers. The importance of just digital, in a whole variety of ways, both in the making activity itself, but also like in Nicole's project. Some kids are digital 24/7 in school, out of school, and creating and collaborating while they're doing that. And finally, the important role of parents, mentors, peers. That was kind of the last thing that Nicole talked about. So I found all these themes interesting. So, and we are supposed to try to talk about research challenges in part that came out of the previous session. I haven't seen this before, but it's. I'm just going to try to summarize these. Changing the focus of research. I guess the point is, we just need to have some research on making.
It's a wide field.
Challenging teachers to morph. I guess that kind of relates to letting teachers create, letting students create, letting teachers and students collaborate together, and longitudinal research. Anyway, there's like about 20 ideas that are buried in 2 paragraphs. So I'm not quite sure where to head with this, but I mean maybe, let me just mention one other thing. I've been over to, when I say the White House, I was, when you go to the White House, well, it usually means you go to the executive office building or something like that, and it's a hassle to get in and all that. But anyway, they've had a couple of maker summits there, and NSF funded a maker summit about not quite a year ago. And these were the people, well, and I've been to a couple other maker kind of things, not beyond maker fairs. And often the major participants in these events are makers, people that have started up community-based, whether it's an adult maker space focused on helping adults who maybe want to create a product or something of that nature or develop their skills, and then some are more focused on youth. And there's some commonality, but they're kind of 2 different incarnations. And the missing link, just all these talks just seemed like they connected very well with this work that's going on, and then it was mentioned that making the connection between researchers like the ones that talked and some of you who may be involved in maker research, it seems like it would just ramp up the movement, both our understanding of making as well as improve practice. So maybe if we could just identify maybe 3 to 5 important research issues in regarding making in relation to next gen high schools, maybe that's what we can do. So feel free to jump in. Yeah.
My name's Nana Pittsburgh. One of the challenges that we've had is, and I'm hoping that maybe NSF has some resources around this, but how to measure and assess really difficult to measure competencies like creative problem solving, like collaboration, and those kinds of things. We want to try and measure those across different types of making settings, like, what does that look like in a library versus a school versus an after-school program versus a church or whatever. But we're finding it hard to find the instrument that a practitioner could use, for instance, to measure engagement or whatever across a program. And so I'm just wondering if there's any work on that.
Okay, that's a good area.
One thing that we're trying to do in a project that we're starting now is what's the technique developed at the University of Wisconsin called Student Network Analysis. It combines interviews with social network analysis quantitative data tools.
Yeah.
And so the artifacts that are produced in the research and in the evaluation and the measurement consist of things that look like social network graphs, but they use edges to depict strength of association between some of the characteristics that you were both sharing. It was great stuff, but be able to depict those visually, so you're not looking so much at single-digit scalar values to say this was your confidence level in this activity, but you're looking at a richer picture.
That's really
Yeah.
good to hear because we're actually starting to move in that direction, social network analysis with LRDC, University of Pittsburgh, and so it's good to hear that that is also happening.
Yeah, and then the guy right behind you there, Reed Stevens, he's doing some work that relates, that integrates social network analysis, ethnography, artifacts, etc. And I think some of your work would also overlap with that. So I think that's a really good thing. I'm going to kind of push us to, okay, so what's another good theme? Yes.
I have a kind of a question. It's germane to the next funding cycle with NSF, which is that NSF tends to separate non-formal funding from non-formal learning versus formal learning. I'm just wondering, are we ready to start blurring the lines and fostering better connections between classroom teachers and after-school programs or community-based organizations?
Well, yes, we are. There are, in fact, opportunities in NSF right now, upcoming in the next couple of months, to blur away. And I'll try to mention them briefly at the end of, when we finish up. Okay, yeah, and there's some people here that have already blurred it, already confusing us, so. Anyway, okay. And that was mentioned by Sean at the very beginning Eric, the blurring of informal and formal. What might be another theme of research that's really needed? Yeah.
I like how the speakers talked about like the role of culture and other things, and there was programs for girls and things, because I was interested in the potential role of gender stereotypes around engineering or innovation or being a creative genius that are like, have the potential of disadvantaged girls in those settings. And I was wondering if there was any evidence of differential participation by gender in the whole maker movement, and whether anyone's examined that, and also if you thought about, you mentioned like that one advantage of this is failure is okay, right? You can just try things, but the failure would have greater implications for girls, right? Who might be under stereotype threat around potential. Look at the failure, look at the stereotype confirmed to other people. Would I just engineer them?
I think you raised a really interesting point, and part of that also, I think, is connected to the environments in which they're being introduced. So if you're, the only girl or one of two in a program, let's say in U.S. First Robotics, and I love it, we're launching 4 teams tomorrow. But it's a different feeling of can I fail versus if I'm in something like the Digital Divas where it's all girls and failure is just, is everyone's doing it, right? And so I think in that sense, I think creating the environment, so I think we have to be careful to not, try to think about scaffolding and baiting. That is not, the solution isn't, okay, we're always going to keep you in this type of environment, but I do think for some girls, and we're intentional about calling the program Digital Divas because it wasn't designed for someone like me. I grew up, I was going to be in the program with boys, but there's a whole lot of my friends who wouldn't have been. So I think making sure we create those entry paths that are engaging and that are supportive, but then push. It's really important that we push to expand and to ensure that they have on-ramps to pathways that we know are really the pathways that are going to lead into making careers.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's not necessarily the research, but it's the storytelling and it's the kind of ways that young girls get a feeling of what's possible. I mean, so we I run a program of student reporting labs where the kids go out and do reporting within their own communities. In our new school out in the Bay Area, the girls just decided decided to do a story called Programmers, and it's about how they went into the coding class. It was 30 boys. They felt really uncomfortable. They decided to create their own coding club, and they told the story in this great 2-minute. It feels very. It's produced by the kids. It's part of the media making, but they were able to kind of say, "This is our experience. Now let's tell that story," and then it becomes a way to kind of let other girls know that they're not alone and show them a path.
What's your name?
Leah Patton.
Okay, yes.
I'm Iris Blackson from the AAA Science Policy Fellow here, but I've worked with OSTP back in June on the National Week of Making, and I've specifically worked on a team that was focused on external events and broadening participation and sharing opportunities for maker spaces with diverse communities. And one thing that we found was, all the individuals and organizations that we reached out to, they were very interested in continuing their participation after the week of making was over, and having some type of discourse or type of network to connect them with other underrepresented groups who are interested in making. So are there research projects or ongoing programs that help facilitate building these networks to build these sets of communities, especially in underrepresented neighborhoods or?
Well, there are some, like there's Make Education and there's some other organizations, but anyway, NSF, if anybody's interested in starting, I can imagine several different types of networks, but NSF, can support conference grants that can help launch something like that, in a larger project if there's, some structure and whatever, so. But there's obviously, the so-called movement is very young now, so I suppose, you can't expect it to be all organized and everything at this point. You have a comment here?
I was going to say that one thing that we're going to look at in the project that we're just starting, the project is around networking. It's around collaborative making over the internet across cultures between developed and low-income countries. And we've had a number of individuals and institutions inquire about setting up clubs. They're low cost. It's a little different than I guess some of the other kind of activities, but we're eager to see how that might expand.
Are those clubs in the school-based or community?
They're both, Nicole, and they're also hypothetical. So they haven't started yet, but they would typically have either a school sponsor or a university sponsor, but they all take place out of school and in homes.
Mm-hmm. There's a network computer clubhouse that's out of the Museum of Science in Boston. They have about 50 locations, and they're not strictly making, but obviously those environments, which vary from site to site, would provide a space where that could certainly happen. And in fact, they're trying to foster some of the maker activities within. But there's a network for you. See, we got it all solved now. So, yeah.
My name's Adam Smith, Einstein Fellow with NSF, and I guess way back in the day, my background was in informal science education since I became a middle school math science teacher, and I guess I'm coming at it from questions of perspective of what can a person do in a formal education environment that's helping to fuel and feed off of the diverse backgrounds that the students are having in these various free choice learning environments. So when you're in that more structured environment, how can you still leverage all the different students' backgrounds and maybe help have that fire spread among more students that haven't necessarily gotten engaged?
So one of the things we've done, and then at least when we're doing more of the digital work, and we're about to implement it. We're implementing it now, starting this week in Chicago, so we see where it comes from. But we worked really hard with schools to create special courses, and so we went in and taught the media arts classes and developed base level literacy. And at that point, we could tell the teachers, this is what a kid can produce. And at that point, we saw the teachers then would embed it into their instruction because, the science teachers like, I know the kid can do this, so now I don't want to have to teach them to do it.
Yeah.
As long as they can do it, I can do it. Then we at that point did our own after school programs where the kids who wanted to get passionate about it can dive deeper. Now what our goal is, we'll still do the in-school science-based literacy, but the after-school programs are going to be embedded around the community and the libraries and the parks, districts, and things like that. And the challenge for us has been to use some digital badges to make clear to a teacher what kids can do. We just had so that was that. I think the biggest obstacle for the teachers in our experience has been them saying, well, I don't know what most of my kids know, and I'm not going to take the time to go through a portfolio of all kids. So how can you summarize for me and have a way to summarize what kids do? Because there gets to be a tipping point where you can say, I now can use this in my class. And then the final thing was for them to work with teachers to redesign lessons, assignments that allow for a variety of different formats for kids to produce. And then left it to the kid to demonstrate that they had mastery to begin to be able to use some making.
And so at the university level, I also use competency-based or mastery-based learning to teach some of my classes. But I think in GSS, including engineering design, is a really ripe opportunity to make these types of experiences more connectable into a classroom environment. At the undergraduate level, I teach a junior level electrical and robotic systems project class, and I've got very specific learning outcomes that the students need to reach by the end of that, but I also am trying to integrate the maker movement in. So what I've done is I define a context on top to try and maximize free choice. I define a context on top, so this semester, or last semester, for instance, students were designing smart home devices, and it was up to them what they wanted to define, or what they wanted to design. And then I defined some technical minimums for their projects that aligned with the learning goals of the course that they have to come out with. And then what it turns into is a differentiated learning situation, because every student or every team chooses within those two boundaries what they want to design. So yes, there's still some free choice, but there are also some limits. So all of them are at a minimum meeting the minimums for the course, and then they're going to be on to become lifelong learners and go above that based on their interests.
Can I add one thing? I think it's important that right now there's no state standards or teacher standards for making, right? We just now getting an MCS. And until we have that, it's going to be challenging to find teachers who can do this. Because at a university level, we're not willing to offer those classes unless we know that there's teachers who are going to need the certification. And so there's this issue of, you need an endorsement. There needs to be an endorsement to create a motivation to create the professional development that can prepare. And so right now we don't necessarily have that in place. So we're beginning to see it with CS.
I've also seen it too with STEM Ed certifications a little bit. Sometimes there'll be a segment of a class that's on making. But yeah.
So you read?
Yeah, I just wanted to say to the question asker, we have a model on project studios, our program officers there and we've been successful in creating a sustainable in-school model that has needed some period.
Okay, we're just about out of time, so if there's one more big theme, we could talk about that. Does anyone have a burning question or thought that they just want to get out? Yeah.
I just have a question. I'm really interested in how this work also provides college conferences and used workplaces and how we engage employers in this work. And I was just wondering if you had experience with employers and to support the makerspace or private interest students after they've completed some other competency program. How do you interact with the industry?
That's a good issue, and I mean it kind of relates in two ways. One is connections with industry, and then the second is maybe credentialing, where you can do something that will contribute to your, your educational pathway in STEM. And there's some interesting work being done in that area for credentialing these informal kind of activities. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to take that as I employer wanting to pay for taking operations pretty bad and then following it through with the employer to take this kid and get starting slow and creating those pathways and then hoping that right.
Well, and to add to that, at the undergraduate level, we actually are, what our students make in our program is what differentiates them when they go out into the job market. Because the way our engineering education is designed is cookie cutter. So every student is going to come out and they will have taken the same math classes, the same science classes, the same engineering this and that classes, and that's wonderful. That gives them a solid foundation. So for us, we teach our students to sell themselves based on, yeah, I've got all that, but then I also went and created a water purification system for a community in Ghana, and this is all of the stuff that I learned from that. That's the value add. And I think that's really the big thing with makers as well, is that there is a value add. Yes, they have the foundation. What else?
One other thing that would be great if we can add in as a research, or maybe it's just more structure for NSF, is funding that makes it easier to collaborate across projects. So everyone's not recreating. You know, if you want to study something, doesn't mean you have to create the content. So for us, we want to use, you know, we've been trying forever to figure out how to work with Fuse in Chicago. And in others. So I think it's oftentimes a little difficult to make that happen. So being intentional around in the maker in this work and makerspace, saying, you know, make sure before we build something new, you at least looked at what else exists.
Mm-hmm.
So you're adding to things as opposed to us all starting creating things from scratch.
So if it's okay with everybody, I'd like to quickly mention funding opportunities that are coming up in the very near future that can support various kinds of making activities. One is the Advancing Informal STEM Learning Program. It's got a deadline of November 8th, and I'll be happy to give you my card or whatever if you want to follow up on that. There's the Pre-K to 12 Discovery Research Program funds activities that are focused on the classroom, you know, student learning, teacher professional development. But if you had a maker theme, and you know, you could certainly have a maker theme within that context. And the deadline there, I believe, is December 10th. And there's also NSF uses a mechanism called a Dear Colleague letter, where it tries to call attention to something shiny to NSF at the moment, and I think making is more than shiny. At any rate, there's an opportunity on, I can't recall exact date, but it's in early December, to submit a proposal for a $300,000 eager grant, and that's a funding mechanism that NSF uses to fund projects that are kind of a little bit out of the box, you know, that don't fit into any of the existing programs and that are high risk, high gain. And this date and maybe something like that will come up again, but this is kind of a one-off. And so if you have an interesting idea that has potential, but you know, it's kind of risky, well, you might want to check that out. So those are just three of the mechanisms that are coming up very soon. And then there's another program that I think you'd find interesting. The deadline just passed about a month ago. It's called iTest, Innovative Technology Experiences for Students and Teachers. And it's funded by H-1B visas. You know, the fees that, you know, Google and Microsoft and people like that pay to hire engineers from other countries when they believe they can't find Americans. So the funds from those fees support this program and a couple of other programs, and this supports programs for, you know, can be anywhere pre-K through 12. Most of the projects are middle and high school, focusing on STEM careers with a technology piece in it. And it can be a local project, but the project has to have a research component or create something new that, you know, you could say generalizable with respect to either researching how kids learn, why, when, under what context, or producing a new way of engaging youth in, you know, in the learning within the project. And in all these projects, in the iTest project in particular, and this Maker Dear Colleague letter, there's no problem of blurring informal and formal, and even in the Advancing Informal STEM Learning Program or the Pre-K to 12 Discovery Research Program, it's not that you can't have, you know, you can't involve, like in the Discovery Research Program, museums are a number of museums propose and have been funded by that program to do different kinds of things. And if you're a university, well, certainly you can involve informal institutions as they are relevant to your project.